They say imitation is the highest form of flattery, but what happens when it's not so flattering?
Cry racism and let slip the progs of bore. Welcome to a small series I'm doing called That's Not Racist, where I like to debunk things that progressives like to call racist. First off, why do the series? Well, it's because progressives like to use the accusation of racism as a tactic to silence people. It's the cornerstone of almost every progressive argument, from economic policies to immigration to hairstyles. Now, while there is still racism out there, it's not as pervasive a thing as progressives would have you believe. In fact, most of the racism happening today comes from them.
Racial prejudice is not cool, but when a person of color discriminates or stereotypes a white person because of their race, in the United States, they don't have the institutional power to back them up and say that those feelings are okay.
See, progressives can't let racism go. They need it to push various agendas such as welfare expansion or business manipulation. And when you consider the blood spilled during the Civil War and all that was risked during the Civil Rights Movement, it not only seems very disrespectful, but downright tragic. We still have to fight racism in 2016 because racism is still good for social and political business. Now, to a progressive, it doesn't matter if you're a Mother Teresa-esque saint. They will find a way to make you guilty of racism. To people wise enough to know their game, the accusations just bounce right off of us, but many people out there don't understand that they're being swindled out of their voice, vote, and cash. And the only reasons these accusations stick is because people are generally good and are horrified to learn that despite their best intentions, they've been acting racist all along. And so people go out of their way to avoid words, subjects, and opinions that have been labeled offensive. They completely shut up about stuff in order to avoid being a bad person, or in most cases, just a social pariah. So I think it's time we start killing this narrative and set people free. So we're gonna start with one of the things that I've been hearing a lot about recently: cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation is about a privileged group misrepresenting and disrespecting marginalized cultures. The originators rarely get credit, but always deal with the consequences.
What consequences? Hurt fifis and hours crying on your Tumblr? What? Now, when it comes to actions, intent means everything, but intent means nothing to the progressive who walketh about seeking whom they may devour. The idea of cultural appropriation is that if you utilize an aspect of anyone's culture that's not your own, then you're appropriating it. For instance, dressing up as a native for Halloween.
I actually belong to the Sioux Nation, and you don't get to tell me that this isn't offensive.
I think I have more of an authority to tell you when it's offensive and that sort of thing.
But in typical passion of the permanently offended, they go on to tell you about how it's okay if they do it.
You're not dressing up as a Viking or an ancient Roman. Those people aren't around anymore, and this is still very real to us.
Yes, they are. They're in Rome and Sweden, respectively, and they still celebrate those cultures. But they're white. It's not racist to dress up as another culture, even if they don't understand what the significance of that dress is or the history of it or anything like that. They're just dressing up as something they're not. I mean, it's all in fun. You don't see me getting mad whenever people dress up for cowboys for Halloween, and by the way, cowboys are still very much around. If you try to inject racism in something and remove intent, then that's your problem that you're offended. The person who did the offending is not to blame at all. Remember, being offended about something is your problem, not the offender. But sometimes people choose these costumes for positive reasons. For instance, someone dressing up as a ninja for Halloween isn't disrespecting Japanese culture. Ninjas are badass, and maybe someone wants to pretend to be one for a night without people thinking he's weird. Katy Perry did a performance wearing a geisha costume because the aesthetic is beautiful and unique, and she wanted to adopt that for her art. It was actually something of a tribute. These are nods and salutes to aspects of that culture, and if you're trying to stop people from actually celebrating these aspects because you are offended, then you are disrespecting that culture. But hang on, let's go back for a second.
Cultural appropriation is about a privileged group misrepresenting and disrespecting marginalized cultures.
Shenanigans. I invoke shenanigans. I see claims of cultural appropriation against things like Iggy Azalea being a white rapper and white girls wearing dreads. The idea here is that both belong to black culture and that utilizing them is racist. First, let's take a look at the word marginalize. Merriam-Webster says, marginalize means to put or keep someone in a powerless or unimportant position within a society or group. Okay, first off, black people marginalized? There definitely was a time, but that time is not anymore, especially now that we have a black president, black CEOs, one of the world's most powerful media moguls is a black woman, and black actors, and oh, they win awards, look at that. Let's not forget black sports stars. Black people have had successful careers and held high positions for a long time. Hell, a black woman by the name of Madam C.J. Walker became a millionaire who made her fortune from scratch in the early 1900s. Secondly, rappers are anything but marginalized. They are successful millionaires, and you can hear their voices whenever you walk too close to a working speaker. They're rich, they're powerful, and believe me, they make sure you know it.
Yeah. I'm in this bitch terror. Got a head full of stacks, better grab an umbrella, I make it right.
Now, all of these black people that I just showed you have more money than most white people living in America. Hell, they probably have more money than some towns full of white people combined. So when I hear cultural appropriation is what?
A privileged group misrepresenting and disrespecting marginalized cultures.
Yeah, a privileged group disrespecting marginalized cultures. I'm sorry, that's not gonna fly. First off, rap is an art form, and while it did originate in black communities, it's become a major success with the world at large, and thus it's going to be utilized and altered to create different kinds of art, because that's what happens to art. Rap has even changed within the black community itself. It used to be a voice for the lower class black communities to speak out, and now it's become,
excuse me, you're a hell of a guy. I mean, my, you're like pelican fly. I mean, you're so shy, and I'm loving your tie. You're like slicker than the guy with the thing on his eye. Oh.
Rap is much bigger than one community now, and the black community should be proud. They created something that changed the world. In fact, they now share rap with the entire world. Cultures from China to India all utilize rap in some form. Rap is now its own culture, which means anybody can use it. And as far as dreads go, no one culture owns that. It's been around since people were wearing loincloths. If a white girl has dreads, she's probably a stoner. Leave her alone. But here's the thing. A race may belong to a culture, but a culture does not belong to a race. That's because a culture is an idea held by a massive amount of people, and some of those people might not belong to the race stereotypically associated with that culture. It is a shared method developed over time. Now, a culture being an idea means that anyone can participate in it, and it does not belong to a certain level of melanin. Trying to keep a culture to itself is not healthy for that culture. It needs to get out there and become something new. It's something every culture has done in various ways since time immemorial. It shouldn't be segregated, but as you'll see, segregation becomes a common theme with progressives throughout this series. Shouting about cultural appropriation is essentially trying to isolate that idea and assuring its irrelevance. It'll fade away as other ideas go on to evolve and create new cultures. Implying racism whenever someone tries to utilize an aspect of that culture is essentially holding that culture back. It's like choking it and telling it you know what's best for it. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't be proud of your culture or heritage. I mean, remembering the past is an important part of making a future. Now, as a Texan, I hold my state's unique culture in high esteem, but Texas culture is proof of how awesome mixing cultures can be. Texas is a melted pot of so many cultures coming together, from German to Mexican to Spanish to Native American and more. All these ideas came together, one thing led to another, and now we have Tex-Mex. Yes, what progressives call cultural appropriation created the greatest cuisine the world has ever seen. Your move, SJWs. Even so, you don't see me getting bent out of shape and demanding an apology whenever someone makes a fajita. Fajitas are for everybody.
And if you know someone from that background who doesn't mind your tattoo, costume, or whatever, that's cool. But remember that one person doesn't speak for all members of that community.
So if somebody of the people group is telling you that it's wrong, that should be enough for you.
So don't utilize something because someone somewhere might be offended. Are you out of your mind? If that's the case, then no one anywhere should do anything, because everything that we do pretty much comes from a culture from somewhere. And cultures don't just boil down to countries and skin tones. Cultures arise from popular thought. I mean, there's gaming culture, anime culture, racing culture. I mean, there's a brony culture, for f***'s sake. When ideas become popular, a bunch of people get together around that idea and they create a culture. So if someone within that culture doesn't like it whenever an aspect of it is utilized and it stops people from doing anything about it, then nothing would ever get created. Which brings me back to offense. If you're offended, that's your problem. So, cultural appropriation? That's not racist, much less real. A culture is an idea, and you can't own an idea. Later.